Hello, I'm Flic Taylor and you're listening to Everyday Burnout Conversations, the honest podcast that shares the burnout experience of others along with the stories of surviving and thriving in life. In this episode, I chat with the fabulous Tetyana Denford. Tetyana is a Ukrainian-American author, translator and freelance writer who grew up in New York with her Ukrainian heritage at the forefront of her childhood. It was such a privilege to spend time with Tetyana today. We talk about Ukrainian culture and how the world is witnessing the humbling strength, grit, resilience and humour of Ukrainians as they fight daily to be respected, seen and supported in the face of invasion and war with Russia. We discuss her breathtaking historical first novel, Motherland, which tells the story of motherhood and displacement and shares her immigrant family's escape from wartime Ukraine in World War II and the shocking secret her beloved grandmother carried for decades. Oh my gosh, I absolutely devoured this book. I cannot recommend it more highly, especially to read right now. And if you struggle feeling helpless, not being able to do more, Tetyana explains why we need to pace ourselves with the content we consume and share, and why she believes celebrating Ukrainian art, literature and culture can bolster, support and cultivate valuable connections and empathy. It's fair to say that since February the 24th, Tetyana's world has been turned upside down, and she shares how she helps nourish and care for herself to keep her focused on her writing and sharing Ukrainian culture with the world. So without further ado, enjoy this Everyday Burnout Conversation with Tetyana Denford. Right. Oh, Tetyana, thank you for joining me today. It's
my
such
pleasure.
A privilege to be able to chat with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Flic. I'm really excited to be here. Genuinely, you have such a good energy and I love talking to people, especially now, but it's just nice to have a chat with somebody face to face kind of on a screen instead of just writing.
It is, exactly, especially when we're talking about such heart-wrenching topics. You just want that connection, don't you?
Yes, of course.
Things. This is brilliant. And I have to say, Tetyana, you're an incredible writer, because it wasn't long ago that Conversation with Love came out. I can remember watching your little publication saying live with Vianne, and here it is. And obviously, your poetry is beautiful.
Thank you.
I have to say, I want to start off, though, talking about this beauty. Oh, my goodness. Motherland, your novel.
Yes.
First of all, it's a book that will stay with me. I have to say, it does haunt you, like a good story, a good.
I was hoping it would. I don't normally like making people cry, but I was hoping it would last.
Oh my gosh, it does. It really does. You know what? It's one of those novels I've got highlighter going all the way through, because the prose is beautiful. Your prose is beautiful. The words are beautiful. But some of the things that Julia has said, that Henry said, I'm just they just pierce your heart. I have to say, I have a little space for Julia tucked into my heart. It's just So to start us off, I'd love you to share how this incredible book came into the world.
Sure. Well, I've been writing on and off since I was about 10. And the thing with, like all kind of writers do, at some point you want to try and write a book. Not an easy thing to do. And I never really had I had lots of ideas and half-finished manuscripts, but I never really kind of took on that kind of project until fate basically stepped in. And my mother called me in the middle of the night, basically said, we found out this family secret about your grandmother, so you're going to have to sit down. And she was in floods of tears, and she had gotten a call from somebody in Australia. It's all without giving any spoilers, all of these puzzle pieces came into place. And I was living in the UK at the time. I had moved there in 2007, and this was now 2015. And I had just kind of resurrected my writing career again after having 3 kids all in a very short space of time. And I was thinking, you know what, this is who I am. This is what I want to keep doing. And I was writing articles for online magazines and stuff. And then this fell into my lap. And my husband and I just looked at each other, and he said, you're an only child. You're the only one who can write this story. I was like, oh, I don't know. And of course, imposter syndrome lands on my doorstep, but I'm like, okay, great. How am I going to do this now? Because I feel like I won't be able to do the story justice. But he was right. I mean, I still speak Ukrainian as my first language. I still had a connection with my grandmother. She was still alive. All these little signs were saying, yes, 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 write the book. So I started writing, and kind of 8 drafts in, I decided to go ahead and start submitting to literary agents. And this was in 2018. And I got an incredible response, which is so kind. And everybody was so kind and lovely. And I sent it to about 50 people, and over the course of about 8 months. And I received 12 full requests, which are kind of unicorns, basically, because, in the literary world, even if you get a response from anybody saying, listen, this is great, but not for us, you think, oh, wow, but they at least wrote to me. But,
Yes.
There was a real kind of craving to read more of the story, which is great. Now, I'm doing this on my own. I don't have a professional editor, and I sent it to beta readers. I did whatever I could, honestly. And I think at the time, the appetite wasn't there for historical fiction, especially for this story, which is completely understandable. And I respect the fact that literary agents have a job to do, but they were all so kind. Most of us are still connected. So all these agents are very, complimentary and kind about all the steps that I've taken since. And it's so lovely. But I realized that story just had a place in the world, and maybe being traditionally published wasn't the way. So fast forward, I decided to research how to self-publish successfully, how to market myself, how to create a book cover with the help of freelance designers, how to, all these little things that I basically took on and learned and did on my own. And then I published it in March 2020 to rave reviews, which is great. And my grandmother then died shortly thereafter, I think a month later. So she was alive when I published this book. And she kind of knew what I was writing about. But at the same time, she said to me, I remember, Mishka, why are you writing about my life? It's not really that interesting. And what's fascinating to me is that I think a lot of immigrant women that had escaped and survived World War II felt the same way. They were like, we're not heroes, we're not extraordinary. We all lived the same narrative, which is now happening in parallel with the younger generation, it's so upsetting. But these are the stories that they will tell, going, yeah, we played music in bunkers. So, but so that's the story of the birth of this book. And I'm very proud of it. And now suddenly there are piles of people sending me messages, and the spikes in my sales, which is very kind. The interest is there. It's not about the money for me. It's the interest about who we are as a people. Now suddenly people are rereading it, even who have read it before, going, now it feels really pertinent to understand what this story really means.
Oh, absolutely. And when I read it, I immediately then went to your Instagram page, because I just wanted to see pictures of these characters that I've been reading. I just want to see your grandmother and your mom, and, and you've done, you share some beautiful moments on your Instagram feed with your family. It really does. I mean, we are seeing this in real time on the news screens, aren't we? Your book also really does echo that incredible grit, sense of humor, just determination that your heritage holds. And so
it's a story about, humanity generally, but it's a story about motherhood and displacement. And that's not unique to Ukrainians. Unfortunately, that's a story that exists within a lot of cultures. And I think people also need to recognize that while we're leaning in with Ukraine, we also need to lean in and understand all of these other cultures and how we've kind of marginalized them for too long. And we need to understand what they need and how we can help. But maybe this is changing, maybe this is shifting the world's perspective on how we learn about people, and how we learn by listening to their stories and understanding their art. And it's not about the narrative of thoughts and prayers because there's a war. Yeah, that's great. But let's focus in on the humanity of it, because that's where we connect as like in a larger macro way.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but I mean, obviously, a lot of us, we've just come through since 2020. We've just lived this like surreal experience of going through the pandemic, and you kind of, it humbles you. It takes you to places where you almost have a little bit of a reset. You almost have like, you start to look at what's important in life, and then this happens, and it's just floored so many of us. It's just heartbreaking to watch the news coverage. But now, I don't know about you, now I'm starting to see some interesting reactions, voices in social media who are now kind of, it's taking away the them and us narrative we're starting to see, because of social media. We've never had this on the ground in a war zone, have we, in this sense? So, there's no them and us narrative. We're seeing the Russian people, protesting and being arrested. It's a fascinating time to be alive. Like,
I think, and I'm hoping that this kind of realization, that because we're still going to go to social media for entertainment and kind of aspirational stuff, and that will always exist ever since, now that social media is here. It's not like people aren't going to use it. People are now using it to get interesting kind of things in real time, especially during something as unfortunate as a war. You get to feel like you're connected to it in a much larger way. But I think also that there's a danger of this narrative, the war narrative especially, existing within this echo chamber and just being bounced back and forth within the same accounts, within the same kind of sphere, if you will. And I think what we need to do is reach farther and reach more people and create a movement that exists beyond those very thin boundaries. Because if you really step back and think about it, Twitter and Instagram are very helpful, but they are also a very, very small slice of the world.
Oh gosh, yes.
And I think, this is what I was thinking about when I wrote to people to say, sharing all these same stories is great, but we need to think more creatively now. We need to think bigger. We need to understand the stories that will inspire the world when it comes to Ukraine and other cultures,
Yeah, absolutely. I love that post. I can remember it almost sent goosebumps on my arms when I read that post on Instagram that you shared, and you were like, okay, like, because I DM'd you just to see how you do, and you were like, oh, Flic, I'm broke. Like, what you do now? And I was like, oh, you're such an artist. Like, your message, whatever you share, will be profound. And now, and that incredible post where you shared that, okay, now it's about putting out the stories, the human stories, because that is what's going to connect us right now. And that's what we need in this world.
But I think, people understandably, I was saying, human beings get very tired very quickly of the same narrative. And I think when that narrative contains lots of strife and war and fighting and the same political kind of commentary that's happening, they will switch off. And it's completely understandable and normal. So now I am trying to spearhead, or I'm trying to, along with other Ukrainian creators, to usher in this kind of new level of consciousness, if you will. It's a more focused, more nourishing sanctuary where I want people to go and find people who are creators, who can reinterpret the blue and yellow, who can reinterpret the trezub and the flag and recipes. And I want to see more, Ukrainsky tanci, which is Ukrainian dancers. I used to be part of a Ukrainian dance troupe. I'm going to share people who do that as well. People want to understand what the Vyshivana sorochka means. Why is it embroidered in this way? And what does the trezub mean? And all of these things are really important. And I think people need that kind of landing place right now. It's more of a safe space while everything else is happening,
I think you're bang on, because it's surreal what's happening. Because you kind of think, oh, we're 2022, like we've been through all of this and this is happening. It feels, every night, like many others, I sit with my husband and we watch the news and we're just like, we're just back and forth kind of going, what the fuck? Like, it doesn't seem real, does it?
No.
And so you absolutely, I love how it's about putting, those beautiful stories from your heritage and, the artists out there. And it's that nourishing, it holds us, doesn't it, while we're watching this unfold?
Yeah, it feeds us. And I think now, unfortunately or fortunately, yes, we're in 2022 and there's a war happening. Can't believe I actually just said that. But in a way, we have to kind of step back and think, well, listen, when World War II was happening, we didn't have social media. We didn't have all of these empowering voices. We just had to kind of do what we can and just wait to see the news and to see and read in the paper what happened. Now we have the ability and the power, so many of us, to change how this history is marked. It can't just be this happened to Ukrainians and then we moved on. We have to use this as an opportunity to educate, to empower, to amplify all of these amazing positive things. And I think maybe that's a distinctly Ukrainian part of me that is always reaching for the positive in the rubble. I don't know, but maybe humans do that. Maybe generally, maybe I'm being too narrow-minded. I just think there exists in everyone a potential to go, you know what? We can change this. We can do this. We can help. We can, whatever it takes, even little bits, which I was saying the other day, you don't have to donate if you can't. Just share how somebody else can, or share a Ukrainian author that you love, or share a Ukrainian mother that hand makes dolls, or whatever it is. Bring us into the fold, bring us into the narrative. It's the putting the people in the frame, It is, absolutely. And there's something, I have friends here, first generation Ukrainian, and it's fascinating because you have the biggest hearts. Ukrainian communities, they have the biggest hearts, but don't piss them off because they don't stand for any silliness. Nope. Like you said it, haven't you? Like quite scrappy. I can remember seeing that footage of the elderly Ukrainian gentleman like fist fighting a soldier. I was just like, there are totally normal villagers that are jumping on Russian tanks, waving Ukrainian flags. The tanks are moving. And they're just jumping on them going, Slava Ukraini, So we are generous in the sense that, like I've said in one of my articles, it may have been in the Telegraph, I'm not sure. But I remember saying, if you visit Ukraine, doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, we will throw open our doors, our pubs, our arms. You are our new best friend. We want you to understand who we are. We want to have fun with you. We want to tell you stories. We are a very generous, spirited kind of people. And we love hard. We play hard. We just want the best for us because we're tired of living under this iron curtain. But do not threaten our independence. Do not threaten our families. Do not, because we will fight to the death. And maybe it seems a little bit short-sighted to do that, but our president is a shining example of how to do that because he said, I will die for my country. Now, I'm hoping that doesn't happen because we need him, because he is an incredible leader and family man and human being. So every day I wake up thinking, oh my God, please tell me Zelensky's still okay. But that's the reason why. Yes, some people are fleeing to protect their families, thank God, but some people are staying, saying, you know what, screw you. I worked too hard for independence to just give it to you guys,
Yeah. Absolutely. Zelensky, he's showing the rest of the world how to lead.
Absolutely.
My goodness. And obviously, I didn't know that he was an actor and a comedian.
Yeah, he was a comedian.
But in power, people were kind of like, don't know about this guy.
Yeah, and but 70 or 75% of people who voted him in 2019 said, I voted him in because he seemed like a really fun comedian. They had no idea about him having the wherewithal to be a Ukrainian president. But my goodness, anybody who doubted him is looking at him now going, he really stepped up to the task. I mean, he understood the assignment.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think he's showing quite a few of the world leaders.
Yeah, let's not.
Yeah,
we could list lots of names. Yeah,
but I mean, absolutely incredible. Really.
Yeah.
Oh, Tetyana. Now, you grew up in New York, didn't you?
Yeah.
In the Ukrainian community. Mm-hmm. What was that like?
Well, there is a really large Ukrainian community in New York, especially like down in the East Village, basically. My grandfather worked at a deli called Baczynski's, and when they immigrated, they showed up on Ellis Island, my dad's parents. And my father's an only child, so he was 5, I believe, when he saw the Statue of Liberty for the first time. And they settled in this community. They lived in the Bronx. But then they had a shop. He was managing Baczynski's, and there's the Ukrainian church down there, Świętego Jura. There's a Ukrainian kind of national home kind of place where it's, a center for culture. And I mean, and there's Veselka, a really great Ukrainian restaurant. So it just felt like oseredok, the heart, of Ukrainians. So I grew up there. And then when my grandfather died, we moved kind of slightly outside of the city to help my grandmother. So I lived with her for a while my parents were working. But I was going to Ukrainian school on Saturday mornings. And then I was doing I was part of a Ukrainian dance troupe. So we would do shows and I would be practicing with them for 3 hours every weekend. I would read Ukrainian stati, like newspapers like Svoboda. After a while, it's really funny because it was my first language. I didn't speak English until I was 7. So I was very Ukrainian. And then when I was a teenager in early 20s as well, because I was going to Ukrainian camps during the summer, everything was centered around Ukraine and being Ukrainian. At a certain point, I remember pushing back, as you do when you're a kid. You're like, this is so uncool. My friends are all mostly American. I hate the fact that my name is so difficult to pronounce for Americans. And I really pushed back. And then I was always, I still speak Ukrainian to my parents. So it's always played kind of a center role in my life with the traditions as well. And then I got married and my husband, I saw it through his eyes, and he's English, British, I should say. And I saw it through his eyes, and he was so proud and he was so moved by our stories and hearing the language and stuff. He got a giant trizub, the trident, tattooed on his back.
Oh, fantastic.
So I was like, God, thank God we don't live in Ukraine, because you'd be like the first one conscripted into the army. But I saw it through him, and he reminded me how important it was to raise our children with the knowledge of their heritage and the traditions and hearing the language. And so it kind of reignited in a way. And then I joined social media in 2009. And every once in a while I would share stories about Ukraine and my heritage and my family and the language and stuff. And that was always present within my writing, and people knew, but it was never front and center like it has been since the 24th of February now. Mm-hmm. And now it's every day. I'm like, keep paying attention, keep sharing these things, and it's just because I want everybody to understand how proud we are as Ukrainians. We are not fighters. We're just proud. And that's where the scrappiness comes from. It's like, pronounce our names correctly, spell Kyiv correctly, understand that Ukraine is not a part of Russia, even though we were part of the Soviet Union. But in 1991, we gained independence. But even back then, when I was growing up, when people would hear the language, I would either get ridiculed, oh, speak American, go back for where you came from, or they would say, oh, Ukrainian, that's Russian, right? And I had to educate people to say, no, it's different. It's based on the Cyrillic alphabet, but these are different languages. But here's the irony, that people in Ukraine who speak Russian still consider themselves Ukrainian. It's just the fact that on the eastern side of Ukraine, there was much more Russian control. So they were forced to speak Russian. So And yet there are Russians and Ukrainians. There are people who speak Russian. There are people who speak Ukrainian who are in the country who are now fighting, standing shoulder to shoulder together within this war effort. Now, I just want everybody to understand that we are not separated by language. That is a falsehood propagated by Putin's Russia.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, sure, there are separatists that are like, no, we are pro-Russia. Great. Have a referendum. Go and be Russian. That's fine. But I think the propaganda machine just kind of says, oh, well, if you speak Russian, you are pro-Russia. And I really hope after this, people aren't going to hear Russian and go, you this, you that, you that. We do not want a divisive narrative. We are all in this together.
No, and that's a strong sentiment I get from what's happening right now. I heard, I don't know if it was a live that you did or it was someone else, but I heard how the Ukrainian people are kind of offering cell phones to their to the Russian soldiers so they can phone their mums and tell them they're still alive. Like that speaks so much, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and because we understand that a lot, not all, because there are lots of Russian soldiers who are now displaying the Z on them, which is the far right extremist kind of Nazi group that are against Ukrainians. But so many Russian soldiers are these kids who are like, we were told that we were liberating. We were told that this is what we're going to do. So we believed it because we have one narrative in Russia, and that is liberate the Russians who are living in Ukraine from Ukrainian rule and fascism. So now they're here and they're getting injured and they feel lost and upset going, I just want to go home. I don't want to be here. You know, they understand that they are there under a lie. So it's heartbreaking. And we know that. And I think there are lots of families now who are offering tea and sandwiches to these soldiers going, listen, kid, like put your guns down and let's call your mother.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And you know, this is when I was reading Motherland, this that beautiful human spirit's really in your book, isn't it?
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Like, I love that. Like you really do see, I mean, obviously it says, you know, a beautiful story that haunts you because, you know, the grit and determination. But those sentiments really come through in your writing.
Thank you. I mean, I was hoping it would. I remember the things that people were saying when they were reading it going, it was very lyrical, the book. But that's just how I write. But, you know, I think what's in me, which is in a lot of Ukrainians, is a little bit of the maudlin in our writing, in our songs, just in our blood. I think we find beauty in trauma and upset. There is a beauty in the darkness. And I think I wanted to convey that in the book. You know, it's a really hard story. It was a hard story for me to write, and it's a hard story to read for people. But at the same time, I wanted them to find hope and promise and love. And I wanted them to really empathize with a lot of the characters, even if they weren't particularly great. You know, their decisions were because of the conditioning that they were experiencing in that environment, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you even write this? Because obviously I read it, I cried, it was amazing, like the prose is beautiful. And then I had to go down the rabbit hole of, I just had to see pictures of your grandmother and I just had to soak it all up and devour it. But how on earth, darling, did you write that story?
I had to write it in chunks. It did take me 4 years on and off before I started submitting because it was a lot of research. And I also needed to fictionalize certain elements because even my grandmother, kind of some of the memories had faded. So, I didn't want to do anyone, a real person, a disservice. So it couldn't have been a memoir. It had to be, you know, historical fiction. And I did a lot of research on kind of World War II, Ukraine, Germany, Holodomor, which was the Great Famine in the 1930s when Stalin manufactured that awful genocide. All of the things that so many generations of my family had lived through. And Australia and New York, like I needed the environment, the place in someone's book is normally one of, if not the main character. And I needed to do it justice as much as I could. I could probably get away with really good dialogue and description, dialogue, but the description of the place had to be just really engaging. I wanted people to feel like they were there and really experiencing what this family had been through. And to make a domino effect in a way, because I want people to read books about displacement and war and families kind of making difficult decisions with any culture. I want them to really kind of then go down their own rabbit hole and go, gosh, I want to see pictures of this world during this time. Or I want to know if this is based on a true story. I want to know how other men or women or children survived World War II, or what these immigrant detention centers looked like. Yeah. You know, that's where you begin to kind of change people's consciousness about these events, you know?
Yes. And this is, I mean, it's a book I highly recommend to my friends, but I think it's one that's so important to read right now.
Yeah.
Because, you know, gosh, those pictures of the mums in Poland leaving pushchairs outside the train station, like those are the human stories, the connections. And I really got that from your book as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, beautiful, darling, beautiful. Oh, my goodness. So, I mean, so much is happening in your home right now. You know, it's like a newsroom, isn't it? Because you've got, you know, the news happening. You've got, you know, the weekend when you went to Times Square, like, you know, the community coming together and protesting. It must weigh heavy for you at the moment, darling.
It does. I think I have to take breaks and compartmentalize. I mean, if there's something urgent that somebody needs, then I'll do it, because it's just helping get the voice out there, and I will absolutely turn myself inside out if I have to. But I do have to make very strict boundaries about how much I'm on my phone, when I'm on my phone. If I'm around my kids, like I don't use a phone during dinner. I never have. And even now I have to remind myself, I have to be present for the kids. I have to make sure I feed myself and, you know, go for runs if I need to. All of that is just going to add to the strength I have for doing something like this. Because like I said in one of my posts, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You know, I cannot churn content, because if I do that every day, not only will people get bored of me, but I will get bored of me. And then my message is lost. You know, I want to keep up my focused, authentic self when it comes to something like this, because it's hugely important to me and to us as Ukrainians in the wider sense. So I do think, like, generally, I think people need to put boundaries on their social media. But for me especially, and I love the fact that I'm getting so many messages of support, and people are contacting me from all over the world and asking more questions. But sometimes I'm just going to have to, you know, say, I can get to this tomorrow, or, you know, just give me a minute.
Yes, because I think I can speak for a lot of people in my circle. We're all kind of tuning into your account because we know we're going to get the solid gold, the real, authentic messaging, and so you've become kind of that for us.
And I love, and thank you. I'm honored, honestly. And I think I have never nobody's ever said about me, from me being on Instagram for the last 11, 12 years, nobody's ever said that they don't trust me. And I never want to take that for granted. And I never have. And I will not post something if I don't believe in it, if it's not true, if it's a scam, if it's pushing some other agenda. That's not who I am. And that's not anyone I will ever be, because it doesn't help me or the wider message. So I want to use people's trust in a great way, because if people come to me for sanctuary and information, I can't, if I disrespect that, it takes so long to build up trust, and it takes a second to lose it, you know? So I have a responsibility, especially now when it comes to sharing the wider kind of Ukrainian creative community, to deliver that for people, because I believe really strongly in it. And if I love and believe in something, I want other people to as well. And I want them to trust me on this journey. It's exciting in a lot of ways, you know?
Yeah. And people do trust you because those who've been following for a while, like I can remember, I can't remember which live it was, but you did a live, darling, and you were talking about, I don't know, the some schoolgate bloody politics. And you were saying how like you'd gone in and there was some mum wasn't being spoken to or being spoken to.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me. That's like you got in there, you supported that mum. This is why we adore you, because that moral compass, it is there.
Well, listen, I'm no saint, but I do get myself into trouble for, saying certain things, and people can fight their own battles. I get it. But if I know this person and they're being cut off by some glossy posse mother, I'm sorry, I'm not going to stand for it. I'm not just going to ignore it and smile politely and just nod. Like, that's just not who I am. And now you're seeing that represented in so many Ukrainian women everywhere.
This is it. Honestly, it's so true. And I've seen that in my friends here with the things they're saying on social media, like, they own businesses and what they're doing. And it's they're putting their mark and saying, this is real.
Listen, we have one life. I'm not going to tell anybody how to live their life, but for me, the way I want to live my life is I want to be honest and truthful, and I will own up to things if I mess up, and I'll say, oh, okay, sorry. I should have said something in this way, or I am always really mindful about how I approach situations and stuff. But I will fight for you if you need it. I will fight for the things that I love, and I will fight to the death for my family, but also for my country and my people. And I think I will, I've had people challenge me in my DMs, which is understandable. I leave myself open because I'm public and I'm a writer and I put my head above the parapet. So I've gotten DMs from people saying, I don't agree with this and here's why. And I will always engage in a conversation. I don't consider that trolling at all. I consider that I think it's healthy for people to question things and have an opinion and say, listen, with respect, I think you're approaching this in a different way that I would and stuff. So, and I have changed course depending on how people have said that something I've said has made them feel. So I am not, like I said, I'm not here to be perfect. I'm just here to be an honest person who is trying to share my story and other people's stories, and I want people to join me in that, not for my own benefit, but for the benefit on the whole, like for a larger message, and that's what I can use my platform for. I have one life. I might as well just live it as honestly as possible.
Oh my gosh, I saw your grandmother shine through there, darling. Those words.
Know. Thanks, Mama. Дякую.
Yeah, I did. Because you've had some very human moments. I feel you've always just been very transparent and authentic and true to who you are. And what I love about that is when we do show up and be true to who we are, and also have moments where we're very human and we say, oh, hang on a minute. I was just reacting from a place of this.
Yeah.
It gives permission for other people to do the same. And then that's where we step into territory of compassion, isn't it?
Yeah, because then somebody recognizes that within themselves. I remember when it first started happening, this awful war, the bombing started happening. I remember I had a knee-jerk reaction, and I said to people, you know what, if you've never followed me before, and you've never engaged with me or any kind of Ukrainian stuff, stick to your lane. We don't need any kind of promotion and stuff. And then I stopped the next day. I said, I said that from a place of anger and frustration. And I retract that statement. I said, you know what? Actually, that's not fair. And truth be told, we need every single person who wants to help us and to amplify our voices to amplify, because I realized that when you have an ally, it doesn't matter who they are, where they come from, or even what their agenda is, if they have one. If they are trying to help amplify, even temporarily, that's what we need. I personally, I've been an ally for other people and other cultures because that's just who I am, and I think it's the right thing to do. So And the universe gives back. Honestly, the universe recognizes that if you will stand with another human being for their struggle, they will stand with you. And I think it's wonderful that people kind of see that within each other, because that's what connects us. This is not about Ukrainians or Russians or other, like, we just need to all lean in together, you know?
Yeah, it's about humanity, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is, especially when you're a parent. You know, I'm a big believer, little eyes always watching, like our actions. And when you put that, when you commented and said, you know, oh, hang on a minute, that was a knee-jerk reaction. I applauded that so loudly, because I just felt it was so, of course you're going to have a knee-jerk reaction. Of course you're going to be angry and hurt. Of course you are. And the way you responded was just brilliant. It really...
There's no point in acting fake, I think, in life and on social media. It's a waste of time. And I teach my children by example, and they've seen me screw up. They've seen me cry. They know that I'm human. And that's the best gift I can give them, is by showing them that I'm human and I fall a lot. And I have to figure out how to pick myself up and make sure people understand that I'm coming from a good place. And that's from listening to other people and listening to their stories instead of waiting to speak, which I think a lot of the world has been conditioned to wait to speak. Somebody's talking and in that person and the other person's head's going, yeah. Okay. When you stop, then I have something to say. Whereas actually turn yourself off for a second and just allow space to learn about somebody else. That's what we need to do. Ideally. It's hard work, but it's, you know, it lasts. That leaves an impression.
Oh, it really does. And it all centers back to this brilliant message you're putting out right now. Just, you know, let's start to learn about the Ukrainian writers, the artists, the poets. Let's put that work out there. You know, when you said, let's not flood the channels with the same stuff. Let's work to the long game here. And I just thought that was amazing, because not many people are saying that.
No. And I think, if we can take this opportunity to collaborate with so many people on such a big level, I think it'll really help us in the long run, no matter what happens with this awful war. We have to have the spirit to rebuild in a lot of ways, not just with concrete and wood, but with stories, you know, and helping rebuild communities with job opportunities and promoting art and businesses. And, you know, I think just all these small steps will lead, hopefully make a domino effect and lead to a kind of a bigger moment, you know?
Yeah. It's so interesting, because here we are, we're sat, you know, having this conversation. So much is unfolding with each day, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I just can't even believe how much has happened since, you know, we last kind of chatted on Friday. And so you kind of think, whatever's going to happen, we just have to go with it. But when you say you come from that place where you're come from a place of love and you're just kind of trying to put the good out there, it kind of gives you that hope that things will be better.
Yeah. I mean, I think the world is changing from these kind of moments. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but there has to be a better world, especially for Ukrainians right now, but for a lot of cultures, like I was saying. Like, we cannot keep going like we have been. And maybe this will bring some light in the darkness. I don't know. I'm no superhero, so I'm just hoping this makes some kind of lasting impression.
Yeah. You know, even it's interesting this week. Actually, was it last week? The Flic. I love that publication. And they put out an article calling out the racism.
Yeah.
That's what really got to me. And I thought, you know, things like, they look just like people who...
Okay, that is awful. And I think, but the media, that's a low-hanging fruit. The media loves saying stuff like that because it's really easy, and it sells headlines. It's great. It's great for engagement. And I say that in a really sarcastic way. It's awful that this narrative keeps being pushed. And I do not agree with that. That's so unfair and so marginalizing. And it's like, it doesn't help anybody, but the media loves it's, you know, it clicks, doesn't it?
Yeah, but the antidote to that, and I see it rising, is those messages of compassion and action. You know, the Polish mums leaving the pushchairs outside the train station. Those actions, the everyday stuff, that's the antidote to that. And it's almost like old structures are crumbling. Like we're seeing, that's where I guess I sit here again. I understand at this point in time, and I'm sat in a place of privilege as well. But maybe there's some hope in this. And I got that in your book. I can remember Henry saying something. I don't know, I highlighted it. I don't know. But he said something about, you know, you just have to get on with it. It's about, you know what, I'm going to bloody read it because it was so good, although it did make me cry. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Henry lit a fresh cigarette, searching her face. God knows we've made a meal out of the misfortune of the last 2 years. Julia stood up, walked over to the window by the door. Hang on, I'm going to take a breath. It's going to make me cry. She saw so little of what had been. When will we come back to ourselves, I wonder, when the time is right for us to? Henry tapped fresh ashes into the tray beside him. But we can never get back to who we were. Life doesn't work that way. We learn more about who we are when we look ahead. I love that.
It's true, though. We have no choice. Like, that's the thing. People right now have no choice. They have to understand that what was does not exist anymore. And that's what's so heartbreaking, because there are these beautiful villages and cities and towns that have been destroyed. But you can't, you just have to pick up and build something for a brave new world. You know, that's all we can do now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Tetyana, gosh, these are such interesting times, aren't they? But I think, you know, the message you're putting out there, you know, let's connect the human stories. Let's use those as our connections. Let's, you know, look at the art and the culture and the literature out there. I think that's the hope we all need right now, because otherwise it can weigh so heavy and can, you know, that's when it causes destruction. That's when the power and the bloody glory of war, that's when it causes the destruction.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I love the fact that Time magazine had the quote from President Zelensky on the cover, which is when he's quoted as saying, "Życia переможе смерть," which means life will always win over death. And it's not in the literal sense. It's more of like the hope that we have for the future. You know, that will never be destroyed. That kind of spirit will never be destroyed. And we have to use that no matter how tired we are, they are. We have to use that to create anew. And that's all we can hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Tetyana, can you teach us a Ukrainian word for hope or peace? What's teach us a word?
Here's what's interesting. You know, the president's first name, Volodymyr.
Yeah.
It's Walter in English, but Volodymyr, the last 3 letters of his name, mir means peace. And he fights for peace, and he's a peacemaker. And how amazing is that? That, you know, we have somebody like that as the head. So mir is peace. Oh,
I don't know anyone who wasn't touched by his response to I need weapons, not a ride.
Oh, that was great. I know. But you know, sometimes that's all you need is a comedian to really hammer it home.
I'm a big believer the best comedians are who they are because they can tap into that element of humanity. They can really tap into what it means to be human.
There's slight disappointments. You know, there's slight no.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
And I think, you know, to anyone who's listening, I think they should really learn, you know, that when you hear somebody chant Slava Ukraini, which means glory to Ukraine, you respond with Heroyam Slava, which is glory to the heroes.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks. Absolutely. And obviously, I loved the signposting they put up as well.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't that brilliant?
I know. I think it was photoshopped, but they have replaced some of the signs that just, instead of street signs, they say either good luck to the Russian troops, or they replace street signs with The Hague. So there's an arrow going this way to The Hague. There's an arrow the other way going this way to The Hague.
That's brilliant. Humour.
Yeah, that's part of who we are. We might as well, if we don't laugh, we're going to cry. So it doesn't matter if we're in a war, we will find a way to make things funny sometimes.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in the humour goes hand in hand with the grit.
Yeah.
It has to. Oh, Tetyana, this has been incredible talking with you. Thank you so much for your time. I will put in the show notes where everyone can find you, and urge everyone to read Motherland. I loved Conversation with Love like that. There were moments where I thought, no one's spoken about love this way.
Oh, I love that.
Incredible. But I will put in the show notes. Is there anywhere else we can find you? I'm sure a lot of people listen to this are following you, but where can we find you?
So you can find me on the regular channels, Instagram, Twitter, my website, also my YouTube channel, which is Craft and Business of Books, which basically helps people understand the behind the scenes of the publishing world and the writing world. But also now I have pieces in the Flic magazine, the Telegraph, and I'm just trying to think if there's anything else coming up. I did a piece for Anna Whitehouse on her website, Mother Pukka.
Fantastic.
So I think if you look up my name, you'll find me on lots of different things.
Yeah. And more's going to be coming, Tetyana, because your words.
I hope so. I am overjoyed, honestly, to be reaching out to people and having them ask me questions and just, sharing who we are. It's my most important work, I think, of everything, because I'm using my words as a form of resistance and hope. So, yeah.
My God, you've had an incredible couple of years. Like 2020 Motherland came out, and it's just you
bubbling.
Yeah
I'm also I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm very stubborn, so my mission is to reach so much of the world with my words, with my stories, with Ukrainian words, with Ukrainian stories. I want people to be empowered and educated, and I just, when I focus on something, I do it. And I want to be here for people who need to understand who I am and what I do. So, I'm getting there.
You're a gift to the world, darling. You really are. Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a lovely chat. And, yes, teach me that again. Glory to...
Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini. Okay.
So when somebody says Slava Ukraini, you respond with Heroyam.
Heroyam.
Slava.
Slava. Heroyam Slava. Oh, thank you so much, darling.
Thanks, Flic.
Okay, you
Thank you, Flic.
Good care of yourself, sweetheart.
I will, I promise.
All right then. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Everyday Burnout Conversations. Please check the show notes for any links to items discussed today, and the original music and sound editing is by Chris Taylor. If you've enjoyed this podcast and have a spare few minutes, then it would be absolutely amazing if you could leave me a happy starry rating and review. It really does help this podcast reach a little further, and I'd just love it to land in the lap of those who, like me, last year are perhaps feeling isolated and lonely in their burnout struggle. Please note, this podcast is not intended as medical advice. Remember, you matter, so don't hesitate to reach out to your doctor or mental health professional for support if you're having a rough time. Wishing you a great week and take good care of yourself. Bye for now.